Silent cinema produced outstanding artists who illuminated the path for generations of filmmakers to come. Pioneers, trailblazers, visionaries. All overused terms but appropriate for this set of filmmakers who expanded the early silent experiments into narratives, resulting in the cinematic story structure we recognise today. The Hollywood studio system also emerged from the ravages of the First World War, with audiences demanding more escapism and expansion of the one-reel stories created thus far. It was Adolf Zukor who laid the foundation of what became the dominant Hollywood studio system to cater for the appetite of the burgeoning feature film. He founded the Famous Players Film Company in 1912. Eventually, Famous Players merged with Jesse L. Lasky Feature Play Company, which had its first film produced by a young Cecil B. DeMille, and the two companies merged to form Paramount Pictures. Elsewhere, Carl Laemmle was busy founding Universal, and Samuel Goldfish and Edgar Selwyn formed MGM. French filmmaker Alice Guy-Blache became head of film production at Gaumont, and the first female to direct a film of any length. With the star power of actors Florence Lawrence and Sarah Bernard giving film acting more respectability, glitz and glamour were gaining their own persistence of motion, as the studios set a system in place for movie making to evolve. The installation of the studio system provided scope for the epic, feature-length films of sweeping vistas and lavish production values. None were so influential or as contentious as D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which is today memorable as much for its appalling racism and historical belligerence as its innovation in filming techniques such as the use of close-ups, dissolves, colour tinting, and flashbacks. While Griffith's pacifistic intolerance seemed to be a reaction to the criticism he received in the wake of Birth of a Nation's release, it was Oscar Micheaux who produced the genuine countercultural response to the first grand epic's glorification of white supremacy. The first black person to direct a feature film with the now lost 1919 picture The Homesteader, Micheaux crafted Within Our Gates in 1920 to be the exposé of Griffith's fallacy. It explored man's inhumanity to man, and featured scenes that shocked, such as an often censored rape of a mixed-race schoolteacher by her white father. Micheaux exposed truths about humanity's imbalance of social and moral justice. He also became the first black filmmaker to direct a talkie, with his 1931 picture, The Exile. Following the path set by Guy-Blache, Lois Weber became the first woman to direct a feature-length film with The Merchant of Venice in 1914, and produced challenging works that would set the tone for the conflict of art and entertainment that cinema has courted ever since. Her film Hypocrites featured nudity via a reappearing naked woman known as Miss Truth, and her social issue film The Blot in 1921 was indicative of the plain-speaking honesty of her work that led to controversy and eventual oblivion in the 1920s, when audience interest waned. But her influence was profound on encouraging studios to engage with richer thematic work in the films they produced. Weber's protégé, Frances Marion, took the lessons she had learned and enjoyed a prolific career that even outshone her mentors. An MGM screenwriter in the 20s and 30s, Marion became the highest paid writer in the entire industry, garnering 2 Oscars for her screenplays of The Big House and The Champ. She also received a further nomination for The Prizefighter and The Lady. Marion, unlike Weber, didn't get the chance to direct a feature, but she holds the distinction of being the first woman to win an Academy Award for an original screenplay. Her contributions to the legendary Swedish director Victor Sjöström's silent work included writing credits on The Scarlet Letter and The Wind. In the latter film, Marion's words provided the foundations of a troubling dreamscape, where the elements stir up feelings of anxiety and disassociation in the protagonist. Sjöström transferred his own talents from Sweden to Hollywood, and apart from making some of the most celebrated films of the silent era, including The Wind and The Phantom Carriage, He also pioneered the concept of continuity editing in film. This is the composition of shots to convey a narrative sense of time and space. In 1923-24, Sjöström directed his first Hollywood picture, Name the Man, but found the transition from silent film to talkies uncomfortable and turned to acting. At the age of 78, he played his most memorable role as Professor Isak Borg in Ingmar Bergman's Wild Strawberries, a fitting and touching denouement to a fabulous career, as Sjöström was a considerable influence on Bergman. We see how, from the birth of cinema, Weber influenced Marion, who provided Sjöström with some of his greatest material in the silent era, and Sjöström in turn influenced Bergman, who then made his mark on such renowned filmmakers as Lars von Trier and Woody Allen. Cinematic legacy set in motion, silent to sound. Compositionally, perhaps the greatest artist to emerge in the early days of cinema was the Danish author Carl Theodor Dreyer, notably with his evocative and poetic study of the final days and confession of Joan of Arc. The Passion of Joan of Arc remains an undisputed masterpiece from any era of cinema, and Dreyer also conveyed this Spartan, emotional resonance in other silent works such as Master of the House, where his images often spoke at a volume most talkies would envy. In 1927, Metropolis advanced the introduction of science fiction to cinema and popularised it for mass entertainment. More than that, Fritz Lang's dystopian tale of consumerism and class divisions influenced the imagery and tropes that sci-fi has gone on to use in all its screen renditions since. Films such as Blade Runner echo the cityscapes of Metropolis, and as with recent films like Ex Machina, explore the role of the robot as erotic, machinery as seductive, pliable, but destined to break free from the restraints humans impose on it. Lang's own Hollywood career was luminous, and he influenced the style of the studios in many ways through his scope, style, and expressionism, proving both an influence on, and active presence in, the film noir scene. Artists were experimenting with film, excited by it, and were even challenging this radical new art form. The glee of creative evolution could be most succinctly detected in the work of the surrealists. Salvador Dali and Louis Buñuel's infamous short film Un Chien Andalou followed the manifesto set out by the movement, and understood that, if images don't possess power, they are decorative at best, redundant at worst. Their follow-up, L'Âge d'Or, attracted the attention of the censors with its blend of subversive eroticism and witty dissection of social decorum. The film is a perfect example of the true image containing meaning. What does not appear logical remains nonetheless comprehensible. We respond instinctively to the image because it matters, because of its directness. Dali and Buñuel walked the line between dreams and reality, and consequently entered their audiences' inner worlds. Held within the works of all these filmmakers, and many others who paved the way for future generations to expand and refine persistence of motion, the impression of the newly discovered is profound. Silent film was fertile ground for artists at play. Here was the beginning of something exciting and, more than previously in Huygens' magic lantern experiments or Paris's thaumatrope, the image could be animated into a living expression of an idea. Though technology and developments in cinematic techniques have allowed films to become more expansive and more immersive, silent film continues to have one advantage. It was there at the start. Every film since depends on it. Silent filmmakers were breaking new ground, exploiting this sudden activity in the image to create stories, conveying important messages about who we are, and to realise what was previously concealed in our imaginations. In these time capsules of a vibrant awakening in art, this sheer joy of discovery continues to delight.